So I think we should start. Hello all, good evening and welcome to our webinar series Caleedo Talks. My name is Vinod Yadav and I'll be your host for the evening. I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists and audience, and I sincerely appreciate everybody's interest for participating in this webinar, which is titled Indoor Air Quality at Workplaces and Commercial Buildings. Caleedo Talks is a series that we have designed differently to help our audience and the community at large to make informed and independent opinions on various issues, trends, and developments that are ongoing in the industry. In our topic of discussion for today, we will be discussing on new paradigms and emerging trends that are related to the IAQ industry and are forming an integral part of the building maintenance and facilities management industry. Our panelists for today are extremely experienced professionals and are industry thought leaders, and their perspective, we believe, would add adequate clarity and knowledge to this subject. So we have with us Mr. Jiji Thomas, who is Head of Operations at Nucleus Office Parks. Nucleus Office Parks is a 100% subsidiary of Blackstone. Mr. Jiji is responsible for spearheading operations across marquee. So Mr. Jiji is responsible for spearheading operations across marquee properties of Nucleus Office Parks. And prior to joining Nucleus Office Parks, he was head of property management function at RMZ Corporation. Mr. Jiji is one of the early entrants to the property, facility, and building maintenance industry in India. Being a mechanical engineer with masters in business administration, he has been part of 2 successful facility management startups in India. Welcome, sir. We are glad to have you on the call. As our second panelist, we have Mr. Vinod Nayar, who is Head of Business Transformation for ISS India. Mr. Vinod has served the Indian Armed Forces as a hydrographer for more than 15 years, and he has worked extensively thereafter in integrated facility management and hospitality industry for close to a decade. He has held a senior leadership position in companies like JLL and CBRE. He holds a master's in hydrographic engineering from the University of Goa and a business management course from IIM. He has a deep passion for IoT-based innovations and sustainability initiatives. Welcome, sir.
Hi, thank you very much.
We have with us Mr. Parikshit Roy, a co-founder and CEO at Caleedo. He is one of our moderators for the session. He is an eminent business leader, entrepreneur, and a technologist with 35 years of leadership experience in technology and facilities management industry. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Manu.
We also have with us Mr. Aurobindo Chakrabarty as our second moderator for this webinar. He is co-founder and chief product and technology officer at Caleedo. As a technocrat and a postgraduate electrical engineer with 40 years of diverse experience in services and engineering industry. Hello, sir, and welcome to this session.
Thank you, Manu.
Yes. I would like to encourage our audience to kindly ask their questions that they might be having. They can use the Q&A section that is present in their screens. Our panelists would try and answer some of these questions at the end of the discussion. Secondly, I would also like to request our audience to please share their views and suggestion on these webinars so that we can make them more informative and relevant. So to set the context of the discussion, we would like to start with a short video
Thank you, Minimon, for setting the context. Welcome, Jiji and Vinod, for sparing your time with us in this webinar. And a big thank you to all of you who've come on a working day to participate with us as to what we feel in Caleedo Talk are very important and a strategic aspect in the life that we spend in workplaces. Now, what could be interesting in this context to understand that for many of us who spend more than 3.5 decades, for Aurobindo a little more, but we've got used to it. So what problem do we have? Okay. I think the context of indoor air is highlighted, magnified, and more importantly, brought a completely new dimension after the outbreak of SARS-CoV-19, which the whole world, and we especially in India, have been witnessing in the last 19 plus months in various forms. Offices are closed, reopening of offices are being contemplated, and one of the aspects that most organizations are looking at, that when they get back their employees to work in different forms, and we're hearing about hybrid, we're hearing certain businesses to come back in the same old fashion that they used to operate in 2019. But in whatever form you are going to get your employees back in office, how equipped are organizations in containing and making sure that the transmission of this dreaded virus or similar or relatable infections which are airborne are contained. I think it's in this context that we would like to start today our conversation. The conversation has no implications on products and solutions that we offer in the market, and all our speakers are talking about issues that as a community we need to understand or probably collaborate to make our workplaces far more safer, especially from indoor air going forward. Just to set this conversation going and ask our eminent panelists to answer and share their perspective, I'd like to state certain startling data. Many research across the world show that 80% of our time is spent indoors, partly in workplaces and partly at home. And therefore, how indoor air quality is largely affects our psychology, our mood, our productivity, our thinking process, and last but not the least, our health. Point number one. Point number two, COVID has set the context of re-evaluation of indoor air quality, especially because COVID is airborne transmission. The third thing is, and which is very, very interesting, that a survey was carried out by Carbon Lighthouse, an eminent consultant organization in the US, and they found out that 82% of the millennials are likely to feel safer when they come back to work if their organization could share with them the real-time indoor quality level that is being maintained. And maybe Aurobindo, if you want to share something before we get straight on to our questions for this evening.
Yeah. Thank you, Parikshit.
You need to be a little louder because I think somebody responded saying that the voice is low, and I'm also feeling the same.
Okay. Are you telling Parikshit or me? Am I okay? Am I audible right now?
Yeah, absolutely, Aurobindo.
Yeah,
Okay.
you go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. See, the Parikshit started with this poor indoor air quality system. Now, there are multiple researches which has, which states that the poor indoor air quality results into sick building syndrome. Now, what is the sick building syndrome? Perhaps most of you have heard about this terminology, sick building syndrome. It is described as a situation in which the building occupants experience acute health and comfort effects that appear to be linked to the time they spend within the building. Now, many a times these building occupants complain of symptoms associated with acute discomfort, like headache, eye, nose, or throat irritation, dry cough, dry or itchy skin, difficulty in concentrating, nausea, fatigue, and even to orders, and so on and so forth. So poor indoor quality impairs the cognitive ability and increases the stress levels of the occupants within the building. And added to that is the transmission of aerosol-based infections like SARS-CoV-19 and its various mutated forms. Parikshit.
Yeah, so it is in this context that this webinar of Caleedo Talk focuses on the science and the anatomy of this whole problem, including the application impact for leaders like Jiji and Vinod, as to how they would now need to relook at managing workplaces and public buildings. Jiji, as Minimon explained, has leading experience in both property management, building maintenance in this country. And likewise, Vinod has a wealth of experience in managing high quality building assets and workplaces in his tenure. So I hope that this would give all of us very, very insightful perspectives and informative information in this evening's conversation. Now, my first question to Vinod, and Vinod, this one goes to you. And connected to this theme, do you think that this whole issue, Vinod, you are on mute, is a hype or a reality? This whole halabalu around IAQ, is it hype or is it a reality? And especially I want to know, because I think I've heard this from many in this industry, in this country, and even outside, that how was the IAQ issue seen prior to the pandemic? And how is it being seen now? And what's really led to this change? So if you could probably help the audience understand that in these two different points of view. Vinod, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Parikshit. I hope I'm audible to you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. See, I'll put it this way. See, the air we breathe today, and it was always a worldwide concern, especially in a country, a developing country like India. Now, recently, with the coronavirus pandemic, which resulted in restricted activities, the good part is, most of the cities started seeing, noteworthy improvement in air quality. But corporates had no other option but to, begin a work from home schemes. Now, add to this was WHO confirming coronavirus as airborne infection, and hence its transmission cannot be disregarded in crowded and inadequately ventilated indoor spaces. So most of us, in fact, all of us, eventually started spending most of the time indoors. And that's one cultural shift which we have seen between pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Now, I think this factor alone has contributed in raising questions on the existing indoor requirement of accommodating a healthy, long duration place of inhabitation. Now, as a reaction to this, I think questions came up how probably architects or planners or even offices can possibly look at new ideas to upgrade the existing space. Okay. Now, I want to throw some numbers here, and it is something which is published and it is documented. IAQ has been long overlooked issue, that's in my opinion, and just because indoor air pollution can be harder to detect. However, it doesn't mean it is harmless. And as a matter of fact, the Environment Protection Act of 1986 if you go through this, it says, the concentration of some pollutant can be anywhere between 2 to 10 times higher than indoor than outdoors. And that is why it is important today, because aside from imperative health implication, the recent studies have also shown that it gives us cognitive implication as well. That means a decision-making ability of an individual in a working place get affected by poor air quality. Now, if you look at ICMR publication, I think it was between 2019 and 2020, 1.7 million is the deaths that were recorded in this country due to poor air pollution. And this includes,
Vinod, sorry, I think there is still a volume or an audio problem that some of our audience members are complaining. So maybe we have to be a little careful on that.
Should I stop? Should I continue?
No, you continue, but I think maybe you can be closer to the microphone so that everybody can hear us.
Okay. Is it okay I put a headphone? I think that will make much easier. I'm on mic. Am I better now? Am I audible?
Yeah, it's absolutely.
Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the issues, if you look at the ICMR report of 2019 and 2020, the close to 1.7 million deaths have been recorded purely because of poor indoor air quality or poor air pollution. It includes issues like strokes, heart diseases. 36% of that 1.7 million is purely because of lung diseases, and more severely because of lung cancers. Now, if you translate into a commercial number, okay, we are talking about 1.4% of the GDP due to premature death and morbidity due to air pollution. Now, this is for in general air pollution, but I want to make it a point that out of 24 hours, most of us spend 90% of the time indoor. That means we stay indoor, we wake up and we sit in an air-conditioned car, we come back to our office, which is an air-conditioned office, we go back in the same car. I think 90% of the time we spend indoor. And hence, when you and me or the people who started spending considerable amount of time by virtue of being in lockdown situation, I think that alone has put a lot of stress. And that what is that I'm breathing now? Why is that look more beautiful today? And a couple of us, when we peeped out of a window during lockdown, we saw clear skies. Okay, I think it's not a hype anymore. The number says it all. If 1.7 is the death million, 1.7 million is the death which is recorded, I think it's high time that we start reviewing things internally. Parikshit, I hope I have answered your question.
You're on mute, Parikshit.
Yeah. So you have some really hard-hitting numbers to probably set the context to this conversation. 1.7 million deaths, 90% time spent indoors, I think is a wake-up call. But before I really sum up this, Jiji, your thoughts, if you want to complement something that Vinod said.
Absolutely, Parikshit. I think I will start from the question you asked, whether it is a hype or a reality kind of thing, right? I mean, see, when leaders only talk about any subject, it's perceived to be a hype, right? And then when Aam Janata talks about it, it becomes a reality. That's a fact of life. See, if you look at the life about green buildings, which has happened maybe early 2000, if I draw an analogy between what happened those days and what is now, I think you can draw the similar parallels in this case also. Early 2000, we all talked about green building as a hype. I mean, people talked about green building, saying that no, it is something which is done in US, not in India, kind of a thing. Right? But today, when it come to 2015, 2020 kind of a days, it's a reality. Nobody talks about green building anymore. It becomes a standard norm. So I think the IAQ, indoor air quality requirements, would become a reality in next couple of years, and probably it is accentuated by the fact that the COVID has really hit us hard, and every person, every employee today talks about indoor air quality before we go to any office, right? So that's where it is. So it is going to be a reality in next couple of years, is what I believe.
Thank you, Jiji. I think you very aptly summed it up. So I have nothing much to add, but to the fact that probably for many of us who are still skeptics and feel that indoor air quality is a hype, I think it's wake-up call for all of us. It's high time that we change our perspectives, and as leaders, as Jiji mentioned, we must take this extremely seriously, because if we are proposing or talking about organizational agenda towards the health and wellness of our employees and their well-being, this is the foundational aspect that most organizations must look at. And the data which Vinod shared is also equally important, that 1.7 million deaths out of pollution. And I wouldn't be surprised if a large percentage of that was because of diseases people acquired because of continuous exposure of bad indoor air environments. Let's move to the next track, and Aurobindo, over to you. You are on mute. You are on mute.
I hope I am audible now. Yeah. My question to one of the most personnel in the maintenance and in the property management industry. This is to Jiji. Jiji, with your vast experience in this, mechanical, electrical, practices, and into the maintenance industry, I would like to know from you, what are the recommended best practices to manage this, to manage and maintain the IAQ at the workplaces, and specifically from HVAC maintenance point of view, workplace cleaning procedures and the standard operating procedures. We are using the chemicals for housekeeping purpose, so that's why the choice of cleaning agent and the chemicals, the paints and varnishes that we are using indoors, and maybe there are other innovative practices as well. So over to you to enlighten us on these various recommended practices.
Yeah, thank you, Aravinda. Thank you for the kind words. Let me start with where Parishit talked about. See, IOQ has been a topic of discussion for a few years now, when the employees were identified with sick building syndrome, which was typically manifested in headache, fatigue, and so on and so forth. On earlier days, the efforts of indoor air quality management was typically focusing on VOC, carbon dioxide, and particulate matter. I mean, that's it. But and it between the consultants, between the designers, and the real estate team of different companies, and the end users were never part of those discussions. But surely, the onset of COVID-19 pandemic, IAQ gained attention of all stakeholders, including the end users. The causes of the poor indoor quality remained almost the same. Basically, the subpar ventilation, inadequate filtration, chemical and biological contamination from indoor and outdoor sources. Thanks to COVID, the focus has now largely shifted to controlling the spread of disease-making bacteria and viruses from the CO2, from the VOC kind of elements which you have been talking about. Now, coming to the specific question about how facility managers can help in managing the indoor air quality. Honestly, there is no short answer to this question. I mean, we are all still trying, making different experiments on this count. The indoor air quality deterioration, to start with, is triggered by actions throughout the life cycle of the building. I mean, starting with site selection itself. When you do a site selection, I mean, if a building in Delhi and building in Bangalore have a different outdoor conditions, and some places will have elements like radon, which is perceived to be a much more dangerous element than anything else we have thought about. I mean, basically, radon is an evolution from radium over a period of time, which is naturally present in the soil. So it is going to be causing a lot of problems. So now people have realized the radon implications and probably looking at that aspect to be controlled or managed. So that is where the selection of site becomes an important element. Second is the kind of construction material we choose. It could be in the form of asbestos. Any asbestos is banned. Asbestos or the insulation material we use. To give you an example, the adhesives which you use for carpet and furniture in the interior fit out emits a formaldehyde all through the life. Now, how do you control that? The only solution is to reduce the intake at that point of construction. Similarly, choice of interior finishes, furnishings and paintings, which is, as Aravindo said, low VOC paints and environment-friendly products will only solve the problem there. And on top of this, the day-to-day activity we do in our facilities, like cleaning, pest control, and other maintenance activities add to the VOC. Since the question is primarily from the building operations and maintenance perspective, let me focus on this aspect first. As mentioned, the causes of poor indoor quality is categorized into two right now. I mean, one is inadequate ventilation and filtration, and second is biological and chemical contamination through the indoors and outdoor source. Now, let us look at how to manage the indoor air quality. In case of any hazard, the control revolves around the classical model of hierarchy of controls, I mean, which we are all familiar with, right? It starts with elimination, which involves physically removing the hazard. Substitution, why we replace the hazard. And isolate the people from hazard is probably the engineering controls we want to put in place. Similarly, administrative controls like changing the way people work, and finally, protect the people with PPAs. IAQ also can be managed with this model, is what I believe in. As the final actions are of an indoor air quality management is almost the same, whether it is the 10 years back story or the post-pandemic story, its actions are more or less same. So probably I would talk more about what post-pandemic actions we have been taking and what we should do in that perspective. As you know, the COVID virus is primarily transmitted through exhaled respiratory aerosols of infected persons. The larger droplets settles probably because the gravitational force settles very close to a person within 6 feet. And the lower size droplets, which is aerosols, which can spread through the building. I mean, and while a person talks, speaks, or coughs or sneezes, it spread through the building. So similar aerosols the smaller aerosol can stay put in the building for close to 30 minutes to almost 1 hour or more than 1 hour and travel beyond 6 feet. So this is where the imperative for the property management or property managers, facility managers come in. We need to reduce the airborne transmission, which is critical and can be achieved through source control. As I said, hierarchy of control, source control by masking and physical distancing, and engineering controls involve ventilation and filtration. But a major challenge in existing building is that the current buildings are not designed to be an infection control unit. I mean, it is basically managing basic controls which would emanate from a body odor or something like that. But unlike a hospital, which is designed to be an infection control, making it to that level of infection control in a commercial building is going to be a big challenge. But how does it work? The higher ventilation really dilute the indoor air contaminations, thereby reducing the intensity of exposure and duration of that respiratory aerosol stay in the building. So that is where it really hurts. In addition to the ventilation from outdoor air, respiratory aerosols also can be removed through filtration. And we can choose a filtration mechanism with optimal clean air delivery rate. I mean, there are CADR, it is called. I mean, we can look at different equipment with optimal CADR and select what a filtration mechanism we should use, which is determined by the filtration effectiveness and the amount of air moving through the filter media. So these two factors determine the CADR. Studies in this have established that upgrading the filtration system to MER 13 in commercial buildings would probably solve a large part of the problem which you are coming from the filtration area. And it is all the more important when you consider that most of the commercial building recirculate the air within the building. So it's a minimum standard we really look at is a MER 13 filtration system. I mean, is enhanced ventilation filtration the solution? The answer depends on many factors. I mean, it is not a straightforward answer which we can say yes or no to it. Increasing ventilation has got trade-offs, especially when it comes to the cost of moving the air as well as cooling or heating the air, which is the additional quantity of air. So there is a trade-off with the cost and efficiency of the building. Similarly, this filtration and ventilation really does not have an impact on the 6 meter contamination, which will happen because of the higher size droplets. It will be probably controlling the smaller aerosols, which is moving around in the system. So still masking is going to be the way forward in that case. And third, this can be used for a space where you have very limited number of people, or probably you have a determined number of people. And as places like open spaces like hotels, restaurants, where people can be, numbers can go up and go down significantly, this filtration and this may not be really the answer to the question. Similarly, in a restaurant, you can't be masked all the time, and you will probably remove your mask for eating food. And this kind of scenario, this again, ventilation and filtration is not the solution. We may need to look at strategies beyond that to control the pandemic. And another dichotomy which we should really look at is when you increase the outdoor ventilation, it could be a good strategy for a particular building. But when another building where poor temperature and humidity can adversely affect the people, then it may not be the right thing. It could lead to immune system, it could lead to overall increase in the viral transmission load, all this kind of thing can happen. So it is the choice of the building manager, what need to be done. And this is the data points available with people as far as this is concerned. And with this background, let me talk about a few areas which is related to HVAC, which is a specific ask from Aravindo. So probably we need to really look at a few points which I would like to highlight. Ensure continued operation of all systems during the occupied hours. I mean, typically we have a habit to look at stopping the system point of time, which would really impact the pandemic control or the indoor air quality management adversely. So my suggestion is to keep the equipment running till the occupied hours and ensure a combination of filters and air cleaners to achieve a minimum MERV 13 kind of a filtration level for the air recirculatory system of the HVAC system. And third is explore the options or extended building hours to encourage social distancing, something which we could do, because today people are looking at hybrid working, where probably people can come in different times, but this will prevent contamination to a large extent. And probably the best is the flushing of the systems periodically to ensure that your contaminants, which is somehow got inside and not removed by the systems, can be removed by the flushing system. And UVC light is something which everybody should consider in AHU systems for two reasons. One is it can kill the pathogens, and second, it will also reduce the clogging of the cooling coils, which will improve the airflow as well as the energy efficiency. If nothing works like this, keep the windows open. I mean, at least the fresh air, you can come get some fresh air from outside to help you support the air circulation and improve the indoor air quality. Similarly, something can be counterproductive. Parishit talked about heat recovery wheels. Heat recovery wheels have the potential of cross-contamination between in and out. So that I think we should be really looking at before we really decide what to do on that count. And another habit we should really look forward to do away with when people are doing the maintenance work of cleaning or maintenance of the equipment. I think we should consider that as an occupied time and keep the systems running. Similarly, all the sensors which is required to manage the property, like your temperature sensors, CO2 sensors, PM 2.5, PM10 sensors, please ensure that they are kept calibrated and running all the time. And these are the major, one more most important thing, when you put in MBR 30 filters, you should really look at the pressure drop across the filter so that your airflows are not compromised. So these are the probably few things we need to really look at from an HVAC maintenance perspective. And coming back to cleaning, I think that's one of the questions asked by Aravindo. I think cleaning has seen a paradigm shift after the pandemic. I think I've seen a lot of unwanted practices creeping in. I mean, sanitizing the building, in the name of sanitizing the building, multiple times of cleaning, and probably using unwanted chemicals abundantly to ensure that people are safe and clean, which is really really not a good practice to be followed, which will add on to the indoor quality, which will add to the indoor air quality by releasing more and more VOCs. And I have even seen people being sprayed on chemicals in the name of sanitizing tunnels, which is really a bad practice. And vehicles were sprayed with chemicals for the name of sanitization. So all those kind of things have been a bad practice, which really impact the indoor air quality, which we really need to look at it and look at soap or basic detergent as the cleaning agent, and sanitize only building when you require to be done. I mean, maybe once a day, twice a day maximum. And if you find somebody infected with COVID, yes, of course you can do the sanitation after that. But otherwise, we should be really focusing on what need to be done, because uncontrolled use of chemicals is even worse, and for two reasons. One is indoor air quality, and second, the virus getting developing properties against this chemical which are being used, which is a major problem. And I would like to summarize by saying that the best way to manage indoor air quality is source control. If that does not work, apply engineering controls and administrative controls as mentioned earlier. Thank you very much, Parijit.
Oh, wonderful, Jiji. I think I was not willing to shorten your time, but although we are challenged with the time, but I won't repeat what you said. You have wonderfully, summarized the best practices from all aspects. And because we are challenged with the time, I will move straight to Parikshit for his next question.
Thank you, Jiji. Wonderful insights, and like always, very detailed and holistic. My third question for the webinar is to Vinod. And Vinod, given the fact that we are running slightly behind schedule, would you summarize what would constitute good indoor air from a constituent point of view? That what are the important measures in an indoor air that one would be needing to look at, and probably with the Indian context and not the US, or we read about US data so much or European data, which may not be relevant or possible to manage in Indian workplaces. So that's one. The second part is, what are the key parameters in the indoor air, the chemistry of indoor air that one must track and manage? And with that, as I said, that how, if you do that, it could affect or help human health, and a little bit of science of what really causes those elements in the indoor air, which are not good for our health, to spike. So the source control, which Jiji alluded to, what are their impact on human health? And last but not the least, what are those elements in indoor air that one needs to look at, so that we and the audience probably are a little more vigilant than what we were before this webinar. Over to you, Vinod.
Yeah, thank you, Parikshit. I would like to continue with where Jiji was talking. No matter how well we construct our building, the end of the day, the occupant must be happy and comfortable. So even though we might have reduced the consumption of certain particular resources, but we cannot quote that at the cost of human well-being and comfort. Now, unfortunately, many times our buildings are constructed in such a way that they qualify for so many certifications, but the end occupants at times, are not quite happy with the way it has been constructed. Now, when we talk about indoor air quality, to put in very simple word, I'm talking about the nature of air inside the building that affects the health and well-being of the occupant. Now, it is considered acceptable when there are no known contaminants at a harmful concentration and as determined by cognizant authorities. And a substantial amount of occupants, that means 80% of the people who are exposed to this, do not express dissatisfaction. That's a very ballpark way of defining a good indoor air quality. Within the space, as Jiji said, there are something called breathing zones. So when I say breathing zones, various agencies give various definition, and as per ASHRAE, if I quoted, it's around 3 feet 6 inches from the floor where we stand, around 2 feet from the nearest wall. That's what the breathing space is talking about. Now, when we talk about the quality of the air we take in, we are talking about what is the composition of air and what is the level of contaminant and what is the level of the concentration and what is the acceptable limit, or is there a standard which that we can follow. Now, if you look at this, as I said before, 80-90% of the time we spend indoor, but there are no prescribed statutory regulations on this as we talk today. But however, there are few references and guidelines. Now, one is that the Prevention of Control of Pollution Act of 1981. That is one reference document we can follow. Then we also have the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We call it NAAQS. This is set by the CPCB, or the Central Pollution Control Board. But unfortunately, they are pertaining throughout the nation, and the standards are used for outdoor air, not for the indoor air. Now, the question is, how does the indoor air spike up? I think Jiji has answered quite a bit of part, but one is the pollution, the seal building itself. Second is the location of exhaust and vents, inadequate ventilation and facilities, unhygienic condition, lack of daylight, lack of circulation, and so on and so forth. But a few parameters which we need to be very careful about as far as IAQ is concerned is carbon monoxide, could be carbon dioxide, sulfur, radon, which Jiji has said, which is one of the major attributes for lung cancer, formaldehyde. In fact, most of the chemicals we use for cleaning, a couple of them result in formation of formaldehyde. Asbestos, I know we are not using it much, but then still, pesticide which we use for pest controls inside the facility attribute towards pollution. And a large part of worry comes from VOCs. Now, VOCs are, sealants, chemicals, adhesives, whatever we use. Now, there are prescribed limit of VOCs which is permitted within a cubic meter or a cubic meter of air. Now, unfortunately, many of us, while we talk about IAQ monitoring, we talk about few parameters like carbon dioxide or PM 2.5 or PM 10 monitoring level. But such kind of nitty-gritties where we go into the kind of VOCs which is present in the air, that needs to be closely monitored. And there are limits which are prescribed. When you buy a sealant from market, the manufacturer is supposed to pronounce or announce the kind of VOCs impact the product will say. Now, as a good practice, as somebody said, when you construct a building, you will need to program your construction stage itself so that you, by default, start using or procuring such low VOC products. It starts with a very early stage of choosing the location, looking at the airflow, etc., etc., etc. Another major contaminant which we need to look at is called ETS, which is called environmental tobacco smoke. Now, this is one of the major reasons, both by active and passive smokers, which contributes to the indoor air pollution. Like most of the facilities are declared non-smoking, and I've seen that there are places where people go outside and smoke, right? Within a designated zone. Many places. And I have seen in the city of Bombay where the air intake is right next to the place where it's a designated smoke. It defeats the whole purpose, right? One thing, we need to be user-centric. That means we need to be customer-centric. That means when we should allow the occupants to control the desired setting. When we talk about smart building or using technologies, we need to provide individual controls of lighting or ventilation or thermostat, whatever it is, to the occupant. I think end of the day, when we talk about a well-certified building or we talk about employee satisfaction, the individual has to feel comfortable. Now, which benchmark we follow? We don't have a consolidated document sitting with us as we talk today. To what level we should measure? A few of the pollutants I have mentioned just as Gigi has tabled it. but there could be more. There could be more. So as we progress, I think we run the risk of adding more to the list. One way of looking at is that, one is creating awareness. Second is by making IOQ monitoring one of the mandatory standards in any of the building. That means real-time monitoring. And third, it could be my personal opinion, I think a poorly ventilated building is attributes to an occupational hazard. So as an employer or as a builder or as a real estate owner, I think the government and the statutory body has to relook at things, that it's a fundamental right to breathe fresh air. And if you're not able to provide it, I think something is drastically wrong with the system. So I think we need to have a relook from a governance perspective, statutory perspective, that are we actually providing the bare minimum required for a human species to survive?
Jiji, do you have something to complement what Vinod said? Because we are slightly short of time and I'd like to have the last question.
Yeah, sure. I think I can proceed with the question. I think Vinod has covered his things now very eloquently. So we will move on with the next question.
Okay, Jiji. My last question for the session is to you. Would you please let us know about the trends and the future outlooks in managing and maintaining the IAQ? What would be the role of the next generation HVAC, chemical technologies, consumer behavior, legislation, etc., etc.? If you can enlighten us on these areas.
Yeah, I'll do a quick roundup because of the time. I think we are almost reaching the fag end of our session.
Yes.
So I would really look at IAQ from a different perspective altogether. With all the noises and the awareness, IAQ industry has only one direction to look at it. It's growth. There is no other looking back on that count. So I would like to look at it from two perspectives, which is very evident today. That is, one is from evolution of the buildings, right? I mean, if you look at the buildings in 2000, it was just a brick and mortar, probably with only walls and roof. And in 2000 to 2015, we largely talked about green buildings, sustainability, energy efficiency, and so forth, so on and so forth. Probably from 2015, though it is not very prominently seen, but it was, people started talking about well buildings. Now, when well buildings came into being, the primary concept was that no, building itself will not cause any wellness issues to their employees. That was the primary perspective they were looking at. Probably my future building, probably I would really look at something called immune building. It's my terminology, which may not be the right terminology, but the concept is that it should be able to manage the epidemic kind of a scenario very efficiently and effectively. That's the way I would really look at it. So, and the future of the building, the immune building, which we talk about, primarily it will revolve around indoor air quality, touch-free access, and probably personal hygiene and the technology driven. All this points out to the importance of IAQ as we move forward. And second is the future of work. I mean, see, how do we see the people coming back to work, how the workplaces will be used. So during the wave one, probably if you look back, I mean, everybody appeared to be thinking that no, the work from home is here to stay. I mean, many of the companies have declared that no, we are declaring 75% of people to work from home henceforth. But when you look at post-COVID wave two in June, I mean, May, June kind of a time, employees have reported fatigue of being at home and loss of connect with the friends. And employees also said, no, initially they saw a lot of productivity not dropping, but they saw a little bit of productivity drop when we continued working from home. This really resulted in a kind of a hybrid kind of a work model where people need to come to work and people can work from home as a mixer of both. And for the companies, hybrid working has become a good option because they will reduce the cost of real estate. They will reduce the cost of administrative expenses. For employees, they would really want to enjoy the freedom which they have, whereas they offer the benefits of coming to the office. So, but the challenges to how to get the people to work, I think that's where the challenges will come in. So they need to be offered. I think, in my view, they should be enticed to come to office rather than asking them to come, right? No, that's the way people are looking at. So how do they come? Because they should get a better conditions when they come back to work. I mean, surely IAQ would be one of the things they would really be looking at, because that's a prime consideration for them to come back. And the technology which will involve occupant levels, health indicators, and ensure that the protocols are followed, the technology will be there, and offer significantly improved occupant experiences through services and conveniences, and take technology to the next level so that people feel safe and their well-being issues are addressed. And the second element to that, enhancing the experience, is the experience through the embracing technologies. Technology is the one differentiator which would really make people to come back to work. And focus on health and well-being is another area I would really look at it. So all in all, IAQ is going to be the critical factor in how buildings are made. When I talked about immune building and how it is operated, it is with the focus on well-being and experience of the people who are coming in. So to me, IAQ has arrived and it will continue to grow up in the ladder of taking order of the demands by the customers. And if you have time, I think I would really like to look at some topic on air treatment technologies, which is coming up in future. I think I see some questions on the UVGI technology, UVGI technology being used. I do understand, whatever we talk about, whether it is MERV 13 or MERV 17 filter, it's a trade-off. And if you look back my earlier discussion, it's a trade-off. I mean, you get benefit, something out of benefit, but there is a trade-off of power consumptions and equipment capacities being go up. So MERV 13 or a MERV 17 is not the ultimate solution, but it is the balance between two worlds which we are really wanting to look at it. When it comes to ultraviolet radiation, I mean UVGI as a using for controlling the contamination. My experience, I have used it almost two years back, and we did a trial with the UVGI with PCO. It really worked. I think we have measured the parameters of biological parameters and VOC before installing the equipment and after installation of the equipment. And after installation, all the parameters came to a grade A building and under the well building standard. So though there would be doubts, I mean, doubting Thomas's across the board about any equipment for any technology which is coming in, but UAA have a first-hand experience on seeing the benefits coming out of it. And probably another one is a photocatalytic oxidation, which I briefly talked about, which uses titanium dioxide catalyst to control the VOC, which has been also effective, whatever I have seen in my past. Then hydroionization as technologies are available. Again, it is a high density UV light, which uses on a hydrated quad metallic catalyst. So all these are got varied successes happened in the past. PHI also have tried, which has also given decent results as far as contamination of biological parameters are concerned. Then of course you have the good old filtration, electronic air cleaners are available, which will use electrical energy to ionize the components and then making them to put together. So all these technologies are being used, tried out by different people. But then the point is, the success depends on each building is different, each place is different. So there is no clear-cut solution what is to be done. So people have to really evaluate their own systems and then decide on what is to be done. So my overall point is that the people are trying out, as I said, the leaders are talking about it, the public is still not reached there. So we are not really know about what is to be done. So in that kind of a scenario, we need a real clear guidance from an approach to resolve the problem from some authorities. That is point number one. And at least what a company can do is to monitor now. I mean, that's where I think probably we should all be looking towards. Monitor the indoor air quality so that you can take an appropriate decision as we move along. And I would like to conclude my words by calling for a regulatory framework to monitor and manage indoor air quality. That is probably the need of the hour. We have controlling regulatory mechanism for everything, but probably indoor air quality is to be added into the list quite fast, so that we have a regulatory framework to manage indoor air quality. That's all I need to present today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jiji, for the wealth of information and for the suggestions that you have put onto the audience. I think I really like your word, immune buildings. I think that's the journey, perhaps, from green building to immune buildings, and probably making immune buildings is becoming more and more complex because of several issues that are coming, and the several experiences that we are gathering in course of our life. So I think I'm not repeating most of your things, but over to Parikshit, I think.
Yeah, so I really have 30 seconds to sum up. Great discussion, wonderful conversation. I think I am personally enriched, like most in this webinar, on very practical suggestions. Immune building is a key takeaway from my side, and I'm sure for many on the call. Vinod's perspective towards legislation and how legislation versus reality versus the future is a great insight. And overall, I think we all agree, or probably are more emancipated or more certain that indoor air is no more a hype. It's a serious objective and a key priority for all of us as we get back to work. I thank Jiji, I thank Vinod. And over to you, Minimon, for a 30-second closing comment.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Jiji, Mr. Vinod, and Mr. Aurobindo. We have one quick question from one of our audience, and the question is regarding UVGI systems. While I see Mr. Jiji has shared his views, I would like to ask Mr. Vinod to please comment on the question. So the question is, do you think the UVGI systems efficacy to control viruses has been proved by any agency or any lab? Your comments, sir, please.
Sorry, the question is to me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, I to best of my knowledge, I don't think there is a set standard or SOP which is existing. But yes, one way of looking at it is that you can internally measure. So there is something called ATP testing, which is called adenosine triphosphate testing. So any living microorganism will have ATP in there. So we have portable ATP meters, which we can probably test the level of microbial infection post the UVG treatment. But as Jiji has said, it's a far much better process we have in market today. Maybe we evolve out of this going forward, but the future is uncertain as of now.
Minimum, I would probably like to add here.
The UGVI question was more on air than the surface.
Sorry?
Yeah, the one, Jiji.
UGVI efficacy, which is an audience question, was more on the air side than on the surface side, I presume.
No, air side only. I'm talking about air side. What experiment, what trial we have done in the past was on the air side. I mean, we have checked about the contaminants. We have looked at almost 15 contaminants, which is coming in from the bacteria, pathological contaminants, naturally. It's not exactly the chemical ones, pathological ones. And we tested against that before and after. And it turned out to be good. I mean, the resultant was a grade A building, indoor air quality parameters is what we got. And similarly, VOC content, we used a system with UVGI plus BCO, photocatalytic oxidation, which also reduced the VOC significantly lower than what it should be. So my experience with both the things have been fairly good.
Positive. Okay, excellent.
Very positive.
Excellent. Thank you, Jiji. We've clearly run out of time. We thank the audience for their time and their patience and for some lovely questions. Some we could take, the others we couldn't. We hope to have both of you in our future sessions on indoor air quality. This is clearly not the last session. There's much more to be talked and spoken and discussed. Thank you all for your participation, and I hope that you all gained from this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you all. Good evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.